All right, let's do it. Let's do it. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you for joining us right here on the third episode of Create Happy. Now, this week we are talking with Jensen all about acceptance because, of course, we all want to be accepted a little bit, right? Who knows? But we're going to break it down and talk about it today. So thanks so much for joining us. Jensen, what's up? What is up? How's it going?
It's good. I'm so glad to be here with you guys. Thank you so much for asking me. That was an incredible intro.
Why, thank you.
That's a lot to live up to. I love it. Love the performance quality, the tone. It's all there.
Thank you.
Caress is very inspiring.
You know? And ladies and gentlemen, I cannot go on without the show without introducing my very special co-host, Joey Plaskett. Joey, what's up?
Hey guys, glad to be here again. And as I was saying, yeah, Caress is inspiring always. You can't help it. She's got that energy.
Thank you.
So, awesome. So Jensen, man, so psyched to have you here on the podcast. I've been looking forward to interviewing you and talking about this for since Sean was like, hey, I've got this buddy Jensen. You should talk to Jensen. And I've been looking forward to it. And it's been like 2 weeks or something. I don't even know. But yeah, I've really been looking forward to this. So like, what have you been up to during quarantine? Like, tell us about yourself. What have you been watching on TV? Yes.
I actually don't watch hardly any TV. One thing that I did do was I did binge She-Ra, which was completely worth my time and amazing. And I didn't know that I would be so affected by a cartoon, but absolutely, it was incredible. But it is so hard for me to sit and be passive with like TVs and movies. And I would love it with my friends, but just doing it by myself, I don't have the tolerance for it. It's like, I'll start scrolling and then immediately be like, this is too much.
So finding the show is a challenge, right?
Yeah. There's so much out there, and it's just hard for me to get invested. And again, Sean knows that I love video games because I at least feel like I'm accomplishing something.
You're actively in it.
Yeah. Even if I'm just laying still, just pressing the buttons, I'm just like, but I collected all those recorders. I killed at least 17 zombies.
Okay. So then a more pertinent question then is, what video games have you been? What is there like a term for like binging? Is there a synonym for that for video games?
What do you dominate?
Ooh. Yeah. What video games have you? I don't even know. But is there a term for that?
Is it dominate, Sean?
Sure. Let's just make it that.
I don't dominate. I'm really not very good at them. I just love them. But I've been playing Borderlands and Skyrim and The Medium.
Okay.
I just started streaming on Twitch, so it's just kind of like whatever, just to hang with people.
How would people find you on Twitch if they want to watch you while you're streaming?
Soupy. So sleepy because I'm always sleepy and my cat's always sleepy, and Soupy, Soupy, because my cat's name is Soup. So it's Sleepy Soupy.
I love that your cat's name is Soup. My cat's name is Pebble. So, random objects.
Pebble. That's exactly. I was like, I just want a random object.
Yeah, that's what happens. There was like something that I read about actually where somebody broke it down and they're like, oh, when people name their dogs, it's always like some name that's almost human a lot of times. It's like it's like, I don't know, Brad or Spencer even sometimes. But then it's a cat, it's like mushroom, desk, lamp,
Mr.
Or like,
Pickles Farmsworth.
yeah, that exactly. And it's like, it doesn't make any sense, but for some reason it works with cats. So I've heard of Skyrim, and that I think actually might be the only one of those video games that I've heard of. But I mean, yeah.
That's okay. That's a good one to hear.
Yeah.
A good one to hear. Yeah. Yeah, but the quarantine, you know, I got really, really lucky in that at the beginning of quarantine, I just got a ton of guitar students. I'm a professional guitar player and instructor, and everybody was bored. And finally, like, oh, I have this guitar that I've had for, 10 years in the closet. Might as well try it out. So I had just a huge onslaught of students that came in. And I also do instructional videos for Fender on their online platform, Fender Play. And they continued to shoot videos through quarantine. They just gave us like an at-home setup. Oh, nice. So I was still able to work. And I also do VO, voiceover. And so auditions were still coming in and jobs were still coming in during that time because everybody was getting at-home setups. So I've just been so lucky because right before quarantine, the pandemic, I was hurting a little bit. You know, that hustle, it's like the up and down. You get gigs and it's great, and then it falls off and you take some time off, and then you all know how it goes. And
yeah,
so,
I think Caress might be able to like relate to that a little bit more than I could.
Oh yeah, I mean, Jensen. One of the great things that I'm hearing, even though when you're talking about this, though, honestly, and this is the same thing that I find with a lot of the conversations, especially like with artists and gig work, is that they still found like new things to do during COVID that just completely replaced what they ever fathomed, in these new opportunities. And so it's like, we're still kind of coming out. Like we may have to be creative a little bit in the way that we do it, but we're still coming out. So like, I think that's awesome that you still were able to do Fender and all the online stuff. I mean, that's sick. That's amazing.
Yeah, thank you. It's great. And I think, as artists, and you'll relate to this, of like, we're used to learning how to hustle, and we're used to being able to constantly pivot and have 6 different jobs at varying levels of our participation in it. So, and I know a lot of our community of artists is hurting. So it's not saying all musicians were fine during the pandemic. All artists just came out, sparkling. That's not the case at all. But I do think we are such a resilient bunch.
Oh, yes.
And we know how to survive. We know how to pivot.
Oh, yes.
We know how to make things work over and over and over again.
Yes. Digging up those resources in anywhere you can find them. Yes.
And I've noticed a lot of my artist friends, like, because we had to like do a lot of virtual work, just really commit to their thing. I mean, I think it's awesome that you took on more students, and more voiceover work. Like, you just, sounds like you put your nose to the grind.
Yeah, I think it was a combination of like having opportunities come to me, but then also being prepared mentally for them. And, and feeling like I could take it on. And I definitely had times where I was just crying of like, this is not normal. This is not normal.
When we talk about resilience, I'm so happy that you use that word. When we talk about resilience, I think we always talk about it like there's this like big term, resilience, but there's literally a point A and point B from the point of like the shock of COVID, right? And then when you said that mentally you were prepared and you were ready, like, what was that transition like? Like, what happened for you to get you from that mental space of, oh my goodness, I'm shocked, like the world is different, to like, now I'm ready to go out there and get it in a brand new space and like start over, press reset. Like, what did you do in that time period to kind of get yourself to a happier place?
Well, luckily, I started doing regular therapy and EMDR 2 years ago. And I'm very much involved in a 12-step group. So I'm doing step work and I go to meetings and all that stuff. And I've been in that for 3 years. So I already had a very strong foundation of mental health and community. And I also came out as trans and started transitioning 2 years ago. So really, all this stuff started working around 2-3 years ago, where I started to really change my life and change the way that I looked at the world, the way that I looked at myself, the way that I learned how to take care of myself, and like what real friendship, what real community means, what real safety means. So I had that in place, and I just thank God that with therapy that moved to online immediately. So I never missed a therapy session. And then with the 12-step also, we quickly transitioned. All these meetings went online pretty seamlessly. We're talking about, over the whole country, thousands and thousands and thousands of meetings. Switching quickly. So there was literally no interruption.
Oh, beautiful.
From the routine. Obviously it was jarring. And, when you're able to see people in person and that physical affection and just being in the same room, where you're absorbing the support is very different than being on Zoom. But I mean, it was still in place, just learning how to deal with it in a different form. And since I had that full year plus of kind of cultivating community and support and
You were ready.
maturity, I was just like, okay, I have this stuff in place. I think I'm okay. I think I'm okay. I just have to make these. I got to tweak this here, tweak this there. Got to call a lot of people a lot more.
Yeah.
Check
in.
Check in. Yeah, exactly. I'm texting a lot more, but everything is still there.
I love that. And you touched on a lot of stuff that I think is really pertinent to kind of what we want to dive into with you today. Like you talked about how you have this community, and you touched on, working on yourself and a couple other things, and then how you came out as trans, and then you've been transitioning, and there's, wow, like these 3 years have been crazy for you. Like that's a lot. You you get into all of that, and then COVID hits, and it's like, when does it end? It never ends. But today, like the big topic that we wanted to discuss is acceptance. And I think that even in just like small, we could take any one of those topics that you just discussed and probably roll that through acceptance and dive into that for, hours. But before we really get into it, kind of what does acceptance mean to you personally, Jensen?
That's a great question. Acceptance to me kind of ties into powerlessness, but without being helpless. If that makes sense, because I'm learning the difference between being powerless over something and being helpless over something, and trying to find that balance of powerlessness. To me is the accepting of what I cannot change, what's not in my control, which is the majority of it's everything except for my own actions. Whereas helpless is victimization, right? And there are times where it's legit. We get victimized, or I've been victimized, and I've been helpless, and that is 100% true and valid. But I find that most of the time I'm not accepting something because I don't want to feel like I'm powerless over it. I want to feel like I have some kind of control. I want to feel like I have some kind of control of what's happening in the world, some kind of control of the way people perceive me, some kind of control of the way I perceive myself. And then I don't accept because I'm trying to hold on to control. So learning that balance between when I accept, then I accept that I am powerless. I'm powerless over the outcome. I'm powerless over how people are going to perceive me. I'm powerless over what people say on my Instagram. I'm powerless over all that. So then there's the acceptance of that is you, this is me.
So I absolutely love that your very first definition of acceptance is intrinsic, and looking at yourself and how you respond versus how others have responded to you. Wow. I don't know, that that is inspiring. I'm not even kidding. I because that's something that I like to talk about, and we all have to reflect and look at our own experiences and like how we accept the world and how we can do things. But I don't, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I just have like a skewed view of how other people view the world, but or maybe this is just how I viewed the world for a lot of my life is, like a lot of times I think of acceptance and I think of how I've felt accepted or not felt accepted, which is like a very extrinsic factor instead of the intrinsic, looking at yourself thing that you just brought up, which I love. Like that's really inspiring to me.
What else I found so inspiring? And it was your facial expressions when you began to talk about not having control. You were actually excited about it. And I think that that's something to really point out, because you can tell as you're talking about it that was an epiphany for you that really was like a release, essentially, right? Like, because you're talking about this letting go of control, and you're like excited, like, hey, I don't have control over that. Don't have control over that. Hey, and most people kind of like get fearful when they lose control. So like, what has that been like? Because that's a weight. I would assume that that's a huge weight to be burdened with, thinking you have to control things and then finally realizing like you don't. Like, what does that freedom feel like for you?
Well, let me just say, it is terrifying. It is terrifying. And it's something that I have to practice every day, multiple times a day. So there are times when it's like I'm getting a lot better with casual stuff of if somebody cuts me off, being like, and they flip me off or something like that, being like, that's not regardless of what I did, I didn't deserve to be treated in an aggressive way. Okay, that's their stuff. Cool. I accept it. That's a you thing. Cool. It gets a little more tricky when we get into the exes and the families.
Okay.
Where you're like, I still kind of want control over this situation. Like, I think, you know what I mean? And so, and it gets very, very, very tricky when you start talking about my core narratives, the negative beliefs or the negative core narratives that have been installed in me by adults and by society growing up. Then you're touching on that button is so much more sore, and you just have to be incredibly delicate. So it's not, to me, it's not this feeling of like, wow, this weight is gone and it's just been released. And now I can just let my hair flow free and live my best life and go meditate on a mountain forever. It's like, no. No. There's these moments where you go like, oh, it's yours. Okay, we're good. But then there's these intense moments of like, I can feel myself wanting to take back that control and going like, but you have to let it go. And you're like, okay, cool, I'll let it go. No. Okay, just come back for a little bit. Okay. I'll just let go with one finger. No, come back. So, go ahead.
I was going to say, it's got to be like a constant effort, like a lot of things in our life when we're trying to become better and create those positive habits and create positive change. I mean, it's constant work. We're not going to just, do it once and then it's like, oh, wow, like, and now I'm a professional and I'm never going to mess up again. Like, this is so easy. No, that's not how it is. Having a positive outlook on life and trying to approach every situation with, any sort of positivity or empathy or, acceptance is work. Because I'd say the majority of us, definitely for me, a lot of times, like, my knee-jerk response is that it's a knee-jerk response. And that means that I'm ready to, it's violent, it's like aggressive, or it's like, it's all about creating some sort of conflict, which is some sort of struggle against power, which I love your definition of that and how you've come across that and how you demonstrate it in your own life. That's really, really cool.
But what I realized, going back to what you said with the knee-jerk response, is there was a point in my life when I didn't have that knee-jerk response. That knee-jerk response was taught to me. So I imitated that knee-jerk response, and then I practiced it without knowing it because I was a child, right? And then I practiced it into adulthood. So then you go, oh, well, that's just my identity. When X, Y, and Z happens, I just do this. And I realized, no, you were taught that by sick people who got taught that from sick people. So if all it was I have a knee-jerk response and a quick reaction because that's what I practiced, then to get rid of that, all I have to do is practice the opposite. So it's same. I know Sean will get this being a musician. Like, oh, that's all it is. If I want to learn a new technique, I practice. So here's a new. So then it takes it out of this personal realm of you're taking away my identity. It's like, no. I'm really good at what I'm good at, positive and negative, because I practice. So if there are things that I want to change in myself, it's all just practice. That's all it is. It's difficult work, but when I can accept that it is just a practice, then it's like, gotcha. All right.
Yeah. So
it's all a muscle. It's just
Exactly.
all things that we are constantly working on. You've seen the Pickle Rick episode of Rick and Morty?
Yeah.
Where the therapist is like, well, I like that you belittle my vocation, but also it's just work. I don't like to brush my teeth so much as I like to wipe my ass, but I do it on the day because it's just work. And you have to do that emotionally as well.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
what's so interesting about this conversation to me is that we're having conversations about acceptance while also having conversations about change. And that's so interesting to me, right? You've talked about transition, you've talked about accepting. What point, how do you decide when you want to change something or when you want to accept something? Like, what is that point of deciding whether or not it's a shift or if it's more so of like coming to grips with, hey, this is how do you decide where change is and where acceptance is?
Wow, that's such a good question. You guys are asking great questions. I love it. My brain is like on fire. So how do I decide when I want to change something and accept it? Most of the time it's both at the same time. So it's accepting, it's learning to accept the things in myself that I don't like. I don't like how angry I get. But once I say, okay, I see that my anger is there and I accept that anger is a natural emotion. I accept that the things happening in the world are making me angry, and that is acceptable. That is absolutely acceptable for me to feel those emotions. However, what I want to change is that I get so much anxiety that I stop eating. I get so angry that I get anxiety and I stop eating. I stop taking care of myself. Then I get angry. And there's the cycle. So it's like the acceptance of the emotion, the acceptance of this is what I feel, regardless if it's neat or clean or pretty or what the majority of folks understand. Like I accept this, or I have people helping me accept it. And then that helps me to make better decisions about my behavior. And so then my behavior starts naturally changing when I accept it. But again, when I'm trying to control myself, I'm going to control my anger, I'm going to control the way I do this, then I don't change anything. So does that make sense?
No, it definitely does.
Same.
It definitely does. It seems like your point of entry is honestly like an emotional check. And that's honestly like the start, right? Like looking at yourself and saying like, where am I? And then, deciding whether or not that is, hey, is this accepting that and being like, okay with where you are? I think so many people, whenever they're going through things, they're always trying to get on the other side of it. Yes. Instead of really coming to grips with where you currently are. And that is the starting point to help you get to the other side of it. You know what I mean? And I think that that's so powerful when you can get to a place where you don't run from your emotions, when you're able to sit in a room with them, when you're able to kind of like even just be silent and hear yourself, and it's just like, whoa, sometimes we run from the sounds. And it's like, it's a lot of people struggle with that. I know for sure, just finding themselves. But I'm going to be honest with you, in quarantine, in this COVID situation, me like not being so busy caused me to dig in, like me not having as many distractions caused me to kind of like take some of those looks in the mirror and be like, okay, oh, I forgot that I enjoyed this, or like, oh my God, I hate that I do this. You know what I mean? I think we all have to have those moments where we check in and have that self accountability. So that's like, I'm excited to hear that that's where you're rooting it in, and I'm excited for our listeners to hear that like that's where you're rooting it in, because I think so many times we always look for outward help, but it really sometimes starts with like inward recognition and you just being like, who am I? Where am I? And then going from there into, you know, grabbing the kind of resources that you may need. So that's powerful to me.
Yeah. And like I said before, like that intrinsic motivation, or that intrinsic like concept of acceptance is, I think, where we need to end up, is that like is training ourselves for that. But I kind of want to pivot a little bit and talk about you know, like the concept of extrinsic acceptance as well. Like when we accept or do not accept other people. And let me know if you're comfortable with this, Jensen, but I mean, you came out relatively recently, right? Within the last few years. I mean, can you speak to your experience with that and how extrinsic motivate, like the extrinsic acceptance or lack of acceptance may have affected you? Because I feel like so many people out there can relate to that, and you've come so far and you've overcome a lot, and you've got this like that intrinsic fire and spark and like strength. And I'm kind of, you know, if you're comfortable with it, I think that sharing that kind of story about, you know, your self-acceptance or extrinsic acceptance, how you came over, you know, and across that, I think that can kind of help other people as well, if you're okay sharing with that.
Absolutely. And just Soup just came to say hi.
Who's that cutie?
So, yes, absolutely. I can very much speak to that, because in the beginning, when I initially came out, well, it took me forever to start accepting it, because I was told for almost 30 years it wasn't acceptable. You know, I had started talking about feeling like I was born into the wrong body when I was 4, I think. Those are some of my earliest memories of being very confused about my body, which is extremely common for trans people to start talking about it, very understanding their gender identity extremely early. So it was very, very deep in me, that kind of phobia and like, no, this can't be a thing. I can't be this. And I tried my whole life to not be it because I was told that it wasn't a possibility. And then as acceptance grew for our community and in our medical system, specifically Kaiser, who I happened to have medical insurance with, then I was realizing that when I came out to my therapist, he was like, Kaiser already has this whole thing in place. So of like transgender care and surgery. And immediately it was like I was in their system, and the process started. So feeling that, like, not realizing that the world was starting to accept that transgender is a real thing. It is not a mental illness, and we have a right to healthcare and to be treated. So that immediately, that was my first experience of being like, I feel accepted. I feel seen by a gigantic medical community. So that was wonderful. Yeah. But originally, my plan was to move out of LA, transition, and never be seen or heard from again, because I was so sensitive about it. And my entire career was built off of being a female guitar player. And granted, I'm good at what I do, but part of what made me stand out was the way that I looked. I'm 5 foot, it's very petite, you know, like a good looking face, a good looking female face, you know, and I stood out, and I was able to build an amazing career off of being that thing, but it was always coupled together. It was always, you're such a good player for a girl. My first name, my mom given name is Jennifer. So it'd always be like, Jen, great female guitar player. It was never just Jen, great guitar player, or Jen, great teacher. It was like, if you need a female guitar instructor, you've got it. So I was like,
That's not to say that you're not a kick-ass player.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Jensen's really fucking good. Okay.
Well, and Jensen, that's touching on other topics that we're probably going to cover as well, you know, just because it's like they're only recognizing you for being female and playing the guitar, you know. We'll touch on that as well, but continue with your story as, you know, from where you were going with that.
Okay. So then, you know, I was just like, I just want to leave this all behind, and I don't want to watch my career diminish because I'm no longer in the form that people want. So I'm going to disappear. Fine. I'll stay in touch with my friends and family. Fine. I was in a therapy session, and my psychiatrist, I was just saying how angry I was that I never had any mentors. I never had anybody to look to growing up. It wasn't even until Ellen came out that I had somebody queer to really look at and go like, okay, I can relate to that on some level. And I just was like, I'm so angry. I'm so angry. And we were talking about my followers and the fact that I wasn't going to come out publicly. And this probably make me cry. I'll probably cry a couple times during this podcast, just so you know. This boy cries. And then he said to me, you need to be the mentor that you never had. And I just started sobbing and was like, oh no, God, damn it. Because then I realized that I have this following of a lot of people that trust me, and maybe are trans, maybe are non-binary, maybe are queer, maybe they have a son or daughter, niece or nephew, grandchild that is going through something similar, and they might not have a single person to look at. And if they see me, who they've been following for 7, 8, 9 years, say, this is okay, this is acceptable, then that could save their life. And I'm not saying I am a savior of the trans kids, but I know that there have been points where just seeing a celebrity do it before me has saved my life, you know, or just seeing somebody else be brave and strong has saved me, at least for a day. So that's when it was like, oh, I'm going to do this. And then back to the acceptance of saying who I am is more important than my career. I am bigger than my guitar playing. I am bigger than my career at Fender. Not to say that I'm not completely grateful, but like Fender doesn't define the core of me. Like my videos don't define the core of me. So I have to accept my own strength, my own power, and my own voice as somebody who has a lot of life experience and a lot to tell, instead of making myself so small to be like, I want to be invisible, if that makes sense. So that was the point where I decided to come out. And it was overwhelmingly positive. There were definitely a lot of painful things that were said to me that hurt from fans and followers, but overwhelmingly the acceptance and the love and the support and really truly being seen for who I am was just flooding in. So I was very, very lucky with my family. They all have accepted me without hesitation. And so I definitely feel very, very privileged in that, and know that not everybody gets to have that kind of support system just kind of come in and take over. What I realized was the acceptance was always there with my family, and I continued to build more of a community, but I had been pushing out the people that I loved pretty much my whole life because I couldn't accept myself. I couldn't come to terms with myself. So I always kept my friends and family at an arm's distance, right? Of like, okay, I love you just from over there. because I didn't want anybody that close, because I didn't want anybody to really see me, because I could not see myself. So what I realized in this finally seeing myself was also realizing that people had been seeing me the entire time and loving me and appreciating me and supporting me this entire time. But I was just so distracted with, I gotta find a girlfriend who will love me. I gotta get into a relationship and I gotta get married. And, because once I find a girlfriend, she'll accept me and then I'll be loved and I'll never feel pain again. Turns out that's not how it works. Spoilers, not how it works. But so it was really twofold of like, I felt acceptance from people that I wasn't expecting to, like the way that Fender supported me and was rallied around me and was just like, we got you, you're this, we're prepared for anything that anybody throws out. It was just like, holy crap, great. But also realizing how amazing my community has been almost my whole life. And going, I didn't see you guys I didn't see me. So that's been one of the most powerful things to go, like, I've had it's like Dorothy and I had the power all along, I could have done this all along. I had these people all along, and not everybody stayed with me. Like I said, I lost followers. I lost some friends. I had to make some really difficult decisions about relationships and leave them, and for people who weren't supportive. And it hasn't been again, it's not clean, it's not storybook, but overwhelmingly just wonderful.
Yeah, like, well, for me, like, well, as I had said, I had been, welcomed with open arms by the choir boys that were openly gay when I was in college, and how important that was for me in my experience to have others come around. So, whatever that means to you, can you speak to how you were welcomed by other queers, the queer community, when you came out? Or were you?
Oh, yes. Yes. I mean, I had always identified as a lesbian since I was 15, which turns out I'm not. That changed. But when I came out as trans, it was absolutely amazing, because it was like all of a sudden, all these trans men started appearing in my life. Like once I came out, and it was just like it was a welcome home kind of thing. That got me. It was a very gentle, like, you're home now. Welcome. Sit down. Have some Cheetos. It wasn't a lot of like, it wasn't this big party and celebration, because I was dealing with so much in coming out. I was in so much pain by the time I actually came out. But when the queer community, the trans, especially trans mask community, came to me, it was just this gentle, peaceful understanding of, if you need anything, you call. And I did need stuff, and I called, and they were like, we got you. This is all normal, and you're okay, and you're seen, and we've all gone through this. And so that was the thing that I needed the most, was just this softness and this gentle of like, we're here when you need us. And I did. I needed them, and they were there.
Oh, I love that. Mm-hmm. So I love hearing that personally. Again, I am still, super new to learning and understanding more about all of the communities that we're trying to support with Create HAPI. I touched on this in episode 1 with Caress, very apologetically, the majority of my life, I have been just complacent and ignorant. I just think, I'm living a good life. I'm being an okay dude, and I'm not like really getting in anyone's way. And that's true. But at the same time, I've been like woefully uneducated and unaware of anything that's going on. And so to hear that there has been, for you, this amazing support system. And the more that I learn, the more I realize that these communities, of like everyone that's out there are just so incredibly embracing and supportive and just and loving, like that really, I don't know, it inspires me. It gives me this like optimistic kind of outlook where I'm like, hey, the world is still a good place. And so I love hearing that. So I kind of want to touch on a little bit of like the negative side of where you didn't feel accepted, because I know that there are a lot of people out there that don't have a great and positive experience. And we need to touch on the reality of the negative, that negative reality that exists out there. Um, and maybe a little bit about how you've been able to overcome that, addressing that negative reality directly. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I was not and am still not accepted by one of my parents. And this has been an ongoing thing since I was a child, which is where a lot of the trauma, original trauma started. So that is still incredibly painful, and still very, very, very confusing.
And that kind of had to still be going on just as you were growing up, before you ever came out. Those feelings and that kind of rejection had to exist your entire life almost, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because it was also microaggressions and passive aggressive aggressions, which are very confusing for anybody, but especially to children, to have to start to filter out what a parent is saying and going, I know the words that you're saying, but I also can read your tone and I can tell that something's wrong, and not having the vocabulary and the understanding and again, the support system as a child. Say, I know something is wrong. I know what is being said to me doesn't feel good, but it must be me. Like, then I must be, because children are self-absorbed, right? Because they're supposed to be. It centers around them for positive and negative. So if something happens in the negative, they're going to think it's their fault, even though it's never, ever, ever a kid's fault. But I am still working through that, because I can't fathom why somebody wouldn't fight for their child. I cannot fathom that. I cannot fathom why somebody would not participate in a relationship with their child for years and years and years on end over something that doesn't affect them. My sexuality and my gender identity, or what I choose to do for a living, doesn't affect my parent, this particular parent, in any way.
Yeah, I have to 100% agree with you. And what that brings to my mind, in I do what I can to relate to your situation, because which I can't realistically, but the way that I can relate is I try to think of scenarios where I haven't felt accepted, and whether it's like a social experience. And we can all speak to this. Caress can speak to situations where she hasn't felt accepted. Like, I don't know a single individual out here who hasn't been in a scenario where they don't feel accepted. And man, I don't enjoy that. And then when I think that I'm causing that to somebody else, I don't know. I feel like that's kind of a headspace that we've got to get people to, where they can realize what it is that they're doing exactly by completely rejecting somebody. It's like you're causing like the saddest thing possible. Like, like, do you want that to be happening to you? I don't know. Caress, do you have the Be Kind People project, right? In like their curriculum, they address that like with kids specifically, don't they, Caress? Can you speak to that a little bit?
There's a part of what we're talking about that I think is really empowering, especially when we're talking about acceptance and where what we've been kind of it's almost as if we've been observing the outside world, and honestly, our view of acceptance, it continues to come back to the intrinsic kind of revelation, I think. And it's like, no matter how many times we can really talk about outward acceptance and whether or not people on the outside accept you, it all comes back to, and I just can't get this out of my head, the idea that we can want apologies and acceptance from everyone around us, but our happiness should never be rooted in that, right? Like, because for that to be what you seek, that to me is so problematic. So to shift it and say, you know what, whether or not you care for me or not is not what my happiness is rooted in. I wish you could change, right? Like, I wish you could see the awesome and amazing person that I am. But if you don't, I have to get to a point that I'm okay, right? Like, I cannot seek you accepting me as the root of, you know, my journey, or, you know, the driving force behind me. And I think that's one of the biggest things you can teach, even when you're dealing with kids or anyone who's maybe being bullied or not accepted, or, you know, in an arena where, you know, people don't see them. You almost have to get to a point where you get stronger personally and say, you know what, whether or not they see me or not, I've got to be okay with me. At the end of the day, I've got to be able to intrinsically get back in and say, I accept me regardless of the fact if you don't. But then I think that at the same token, there is something, and we all have a responsibility to say, I'm going to try, right, to accept people around me. Like, I think that's something that we personally have to be responsible for. And when we look at people who have not quite made that jump or that leap into taking that responsibility, it hurts. Because for people who have leaped into that and are able to see other people and accept them, it's almost like, why can't you get there, right? Like, why can you not make the leap? But a lot of what I've found in my life, and even in my own family, and even in my own friends, and, you know, as I travel and I meet people, there's so much that each individual person is dealing with their own relationship to acceptance that hinders each of us from meeting each other on different levels. And I think I've learned in 2020 that there's compassion I have to give in areas where I certainly don't feel like I want to. I have learned in 2020 that there are people who will probably never, ever quite get me. They will just never, ever get there. And I can have conversation after conversation, but what is ingrained in them and their ability to be okay with making change, they're just not willing to do that. And I have to also accept that they're gonna not change. You know what I mean? And I think that there's just these levels of acceptance that I just think we're always constantly battling, changing, and shifting. And I guess I get back to, and because we could talk about this all day, but I guess the root of what I'm more tied to, that I hope that our listeners and that people, just the click that has to happen, is that regardless of if everyone else does, you have to get back to the point where you accept you. And we got to kind of just work on accepting people for who they are, regardless if they're not where we want them to be on all levels. And I think that's just the hardest thing for us as humans to get to. You know what I mean? It's a struggle every day. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I look at friends and I want them to change. And honestly, I have to ask myself at the end of the day, like, do I lose you as a friend because you have not changed? Or do I say, you know what? I'm exhausted with trying to change you. Like, at this point, I'm just going to have to accept you. And like, it's sad, but it's honestly a constant battle. And I think specifically for marginalized groups who are not accepted, it's a constant battle to exist where you're not accepted, but still be like, okay, it's all right. It's okay. No, it's okay. You know, and it's like, no, it's not okay. But then it's like, it's okay. But then it's not okay. And we're constantly dealing with this. And, you know, it's just the reality of our life. Something we must accept is that we're going to have things we can't accept and things we must accept, right? Like, it's just a weird place to be in as a human.
Absolutely. And I do want to say that with the work that I've done, I'm able to do this work because I'm in a place of privilege. I have the money for therapy. I mean, luckily, all 12 step is free. So just if anybody's ever interested in 12 step, it's completely free. Highly recommend it. But I live in Los Angeles where I can be out safer. So I am able to process acceptance and process my own stuff and my own trauma because I'm safe, and safety is an absolute privilege. So I don't want to pretend that like, oh, all you have to do is accept yourself, come out, wave some flags, wear a shirt, and
Fairy
you'll
dust.
be safe. Yeah, fairy dust, and then all your stuff will be okay. Because for trans women of color, the average life expectancy for trans women of color is 34 years old.
God.
So them being who they are and accepting who they are and living that life is dangerous. It is deadly. It is scary. So I want to make sure that I'm being very, very sensitive to the acceptance. And I totally hear what you're saying, Chris, about this idea of you want to accept that other people, okay, that's who they are, but sometimes it has to be done from a place of safety. And that is not a good place. That is not a fair place to put marginalized people in, of having to accept unacceptable behavior. And I think that's where the idea of acceptance and acceptance of other people gets really murky, because unacceptable behavior, unacceptable treatment of anybody, especially marginalized communities, especially people of color, especially women, right? All this intersectionality is not okay and is not acceptable on any level. And that does not deserve that aspect. The action itself, the construct of it, does not deserve compassion, does not deserve empathy. Now, however, how did we get here? And our own lack of compassion or whatever, then the root of it, I think, deserves to be looked at. But to say like, well, we just have to accept that some people are going to get shot for no reason. No,
and I think
no.
I think the important thing is, and this is one of the things that I continue to I think this is something you have to always make the change in the dichotomy between when you look at people, is that there are people's thoughts and there are people's actions. And I think that when we speak about changing or hoping that people's thoughts change, I think that is problematic. Now, when we see people's actions, and I think that hate, discrimination, bias, all of these sorts of things, your thoughts turn into actions that impede upon my ability to be me, we have an issue. However, if your thoughts have not changed and you still look at me the same way as you did before we've had these conversations, I'm not going to waste my time continuing to try and change your mindset. However, you and everyone is responsible for their actions. And I think that, specifically in 2020, I think a lot of people have seen actions out there and they're not able to separate actions from the mental. And I think that we have to, even in loving people who don't see us, like, it's something that I have to look at people, and this is a leap I do have to make as a minority. I have to look at people who do not see me. And if you have not harmed me physically, the only way you mentally make the shift of recognizing me as someone who is valid and should deserve respect is not for me to kind of like beat you over the head with, hey, look at me, look at me, look at me. It's honestly for me to show you the compassion you don't show. That honestly is the only way. Like when we talk about kindness, right? And I have literally seen kindness shift people's mindsets, change the hardest of hearts when someone who does not deserve compassion receives it. And it's almost like, whoa, to them, because they know they don't deserve it. But yet and still, there is a power that we have when we get to a place where we can honestly, we can be okay with the fact that people have not done the work that we've done. And, you know, I can encourage the people around me to do that work. I can even help give you the tools, but I'm not going to lose sleep whether or not you get the message. However, I agree 1000% with you. At the point when your thoughts turn into actions that are harmful, then that's something I judge. That's something I can say you've gone too far. You know, even when you were talking about earlier, when you think about your anger and you start and you say, listen, I am angry, but I don't like when I do da 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 da. You know, my mom had always taught me, you know, people are people. They will, their thoughts, their who they are as individuals, they're all people. Now, the decisions they make, the actions they make, those are bad. People aren't bad. The decisions you make, the action you took, you know what I mean? Like what you chose to do with where you were. You can be angry, but how you acted on that anger was the point of problems, you know? And so I just think it's important for us to always make those separations. But I 1000% agree with you in the fact that, you know, our actions and what we choose to do with our thoughts is so intrinsically powerful, and we must take responsibility and hold others accountable for it.
Absolutely. I absolutely 100% agree with you, and being able to distinguish, because I think people, you know, the sicker you are, the more you think that your thoughts justify the action. And as I'm getting less sick, because I'm the same way, I was the same way. I was like, well, I feel this way, therefore I get to do this. That's how I lived, again, because that's what I was taught. And that's what, you know, my parents were taught. So it wasn't who I was. It was, I'm a really good student. I learned really well. I learned really fast, and I imitated them. But pulling that apart and saying, I have every right to feel, I don't have every right to do the action. Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. And that's been revolutionary for me in my own stuff, but it's also been revolutionary for watching others try to justify their actions by their feelings. I felt afraid, therefore I did this. I felt like this person was a threat, therefore
so I did.
So I did this. And for the longest time, it made sense to me because that's what I knew.
Yeah.
And it made sense to me in relationships. Well, it was like, well, I cheated on you because I didn't feel like you were a good partner, and me going, oh, that makes perfect sense. I wasn't a good partner. Yeah. I'm sorry. I should have done more. I totally see why you cheated. Great. Okay. I'll do better. And going like, once I saw it for myself of like, no. Me being upset doesn't mean that I get to cut myself. That's a choice. But also, you being upset with me doesn't mean that you get to be disrespectful and hurt me physically, mentally, or emotionally.
Yeah.
So pulling that apart, and it's so difficult, especially if you are in your ways.
I think the most difficult part of that is it's really, you know, how can you accept people who are doing the unacceptable? And that kind of turns us into like, well, we're judging them, they're judging us. And it's just this never ending cyclical battle that just spirals ever and, you know, forever. But, you know, I think on a base level as humans, you know, the entire concept of Create HAPI, like why we're all talking about this, is we want to bring awareness to this conversation, you know, and we want to generate the idea of like empathy. So what we need to do, more specifically, whether we're, you know, like in any situation, is like, okay, I'm doing this thing to this person. And this is like a story that kids are told when they're like 2 years old. It's like, do you want him to do that to you? No, don't do it to him. That's what my mom told me to do with my brothers. I was like 2 years old. It's like my first memory is my mom's just like, you don't want your brother doing that to you, do you? And I'm like, no. And so she's like, don't do it to him. And then I would go and do it anyway because I was a selfish little like monster of a child. But and that's like a great example is like, as humans, we have that first thought process, like you said, Jensen, where it's like, and Caress, you illustrated it perfectly, where it's like there are our thoughts and then how we act on them. And I love that because it brings me back to this. I love psychology and everything else. And we actually touched on this for like a second just before the podcast, Caress, where we've got this crazy capacity to download information into our brains. And there are thousands of true realities. And that first response, like when we feel and then we act almost viscerally, or it's a lot of times it's a negative response. We're feeling that because we're perceiving one reality. But then, Jensen, what you explained is like, oh wait, no. I realized that experience, what they told me about how they felt and why they did that was a true reality. It was, but that wasn't the best true reality. And so I have to shift what information I'm choosing to interpret right now, because there's a lot of, and for those of you who didn't listen to episode 1, that we download 11 million bits of data every second, our brains, but we only actually process 40 bits of those per second. And we're choosing which 40 of 11 million bits of data to interpret, which means that the first 40 bits could be really, really negative, and it's true, but it's not the best true reality. And so if we stop and we think, we can process a different 40 bits of data and realize, okay, there is a better result, and I can act to create a better result. And so that's kind of where I'm thinking, like we can take this conversation. It's like, we've discussed so many amazing things. And Jensen, thank you so much for your input. And Caress, that was a beautiful illustration of the actions to like, the thoughts to the actions. So how are we now with everything that we've learned? And I think actually it's almost summed up. It's like, what are the actions that we can take? Those of us here in this discussion, or any of you guys listening, what are actions that we can take to spread acceptance in our culture, in our society, in our own personal ecosystem of people, in our family, in our friends? What are actions that we can take? Because we can't control other people, but we can influence other people, and we can do it positively. So what are actions that we can do? Like, I don't know, Jensen, like what's one action you feel like you take in your life that can make a positive impact and influence on your personal ecosystem around you?
So I always go back to the Serenity Prayer, because I have to say it a lot, but I break it down. So it's like the start is like God or higher power or spirituality or something bigger than myself. The ocean, trees, anything that's just bigger than me that I have no control over. So it doesn't have to be God in this white beard up in the sky with baby Jesus. You know what I mean? But whatever, because I know a lot of people get turned off by God, but yeah, rocking baby Jesus. But, so God, so anything bigger than myself, grant me the serenity. So grant me the peace of mind. Grant me a place of peace that I can come to, because serenity is not rushed. Serenity is not forced. Serenity is not controlling. So grant me a space where I can be calm and peaceful to accept the things I cannot change. So that everything that I cannot change is outside of me. Every single thing, everything outside of me, I cannot change. The courage to change the things I can, everything inside of me. And then the wisdom to know the difference, to when I want to start reaching it out to change all these things, or when I want to start closing off to working on myself. So that's where I start with that, and then go, okay, if I can't control any outcomes and I can't control anybody but myself, then it's on me to set up, and this is me personally, it's on me to set up spaces where people can come to feel safe and to feel heard and to gain knowledge. So whatever that looks like, whether it be my Instagram page, or like I've started a Discord, or we've had safe space Zoom hang, to where I can say, look, I am creating a space, a room, a virtual room, any kind of room that people can come to, where they can express their feelings, they can ask questions, they can be messy, but they have somewhere safe to go. That is what I can provide. Now, if people come in, I can't control necessarily who comes in and what they say, but I can control if they're in. And I control the space that I create, and I can control the manner at which I'm trying to produce something. So if I'm trying to produce something to get a reaction, like, well, I'm doing this for the people because I want them to think that I'm a good person, and I want them to think that I'm woke, and I want them to think that I'm not racist, and I want them to think, whatever it is. It's like, Hank, check yourself. Check yourself. Why are you doing it? Are you doing it for an outcome? Or saying, this is the thing that I have control over. And me personally, I am really good and I'm really passionate about creating a lot of very small communities of people that are able to come together and speak to each other and create a support system. That's what I'm good at. I'm not really good at like the big stuff, which is why I'm not crazy about the Instagram. I'm not, I'm not good at I'm not good at like going to congressmen and making a speech about something or something like that. What I am really good at is taking care of people who are wounded, but who also are looking to learn how to take care of themselves. If that makes sense. Like
No,
that
does.
That is my strong point, and to help people to be seen and to teach them what I've learned about building confidence and building acceptance and building self-assurance. And then they can take that wherever they want. But I can't, like, it's so hard because I want to control what people say. I know where this comes from, but I sometimes desperately want people to feel safe, and I was so ignorant to what was going on until 2020. And I was so ignorant to my Black friends who then were telling me I feel unsafe all the time. Completely ignorant. And so this whole new world of unsafety has been revealed, and I am grateful for it, but also like, okay, what do I now need to do to be a safe person for people looking for that? Again, not to caretake, not to be codependent,
but to be available.
But to be available. Yeah. How have I been racist? How have I done microaggressions? How have I been transphobic? Which I've done all of those things. Not because I'm a bad person, not because I had any malicious intent.
Exactly.
I didn't know. So how do I recognize my own behavior? And then that gives me so much more space instead of running from it, of like, well, I'm not racist. I would never. Be like, bitch. Like, oh.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Instead of pushing that, but that's the acceptance of, I have to accept my shortcomings. And when I deal with it, and when I deal how I've done microaggression to my Black friends, when I deal with inappropriate things that I've said to my trans friends or to my bisexual friends, when I deal with it, come to terms with it, and then make a simple amends to them, all this room opens up for then me to accept others into the space and create larger and safer places. But again, back to the intrinsically, I have to do the work of looking at the ugly parts of myself. Again, I wasn't born with it. I wasn't born with microaggressions. I wasn't born being passive aggressive. I wasn't born with anger issues. But what was implanted in me, though it wasn't my fault, it is now, as an adult, my responsibility. So yes, I accept that this was not my fault as a child and nothing to do with me, but I also have to accept now, you got to clean up your shit. Clean it up. And then I can see the world clearer. I can see people clearer, and I can offer a safer place. So that to me is, because then when I'm able to accept people for their shortcomings,
I think
most of the time, like Caress was saying, most of the time you just see them deflate, like in a positive way of just like, oh, thank you. Nobody's ever listened to me. I was like, yeah, because I've listened to the ugly parts of myself, so I can listen to you right now.
I think that's a great example of I mean, that was a couple different examples actually, and a very meaningful example of an action to take that can spread acceptance is, creating a safe space for others to feel accepted. And I mean, I think that kind of epitomizes how to really spread acceptance, is because if I feel accepted, most of the time, I can't say that I'm great at it always, but when I feel accepted, or feels anything positive, I want to spread that to other people. And hopefully when they feel accepted and they feel positive, or they feel loved and accepted, then they want to spread that to other people. And I mean, it's always going to come down to empathy. I'm going to say it over and over again, like when we empathize and we try to, we've got a curiosity for who somebody else is. And when we then take that step to try to understand them and accept them, I think on a very fundamental level, they will feel that acceptance and that love and support from us. And I think barriers will come down. I think, that positivity can spread. And I just absolutely love that.
Well, and also to say, you can have unconditional love and you can have acceptance with boundaries. And I think that's another
100%.
thing.
Yes, it needs to be with
talked
boundaries.
about with boundaries. Exactly.
You don't.
I can accept that you feel this way, but that doesn't mean that you have to take other people's baggage. That doesn't mean that you have to apologize for existing. That doesn't mean that you have to soothe the aggressors.
No, and I think you guys covered that pretty well earlier. It's like you got to take care of yourself. It's like when you're on an airplane, you put your own mask on first, put on somebody else's mask after that. And that is the takeaways I get from going on, flights. It's like, this is the life lesson right now, guys. Okay. But really, that's how we have to do it. And so I don't know, for me, that the biggest takeaway for actions that we can take is check ourselves, make sure we're in the right place. We can accept ourselves, and then we can spread that acceptance by accepting others. We got to make sure we're in a good place. We can show other people that same acceptance that we've shown ourselves, and they can feel love and support. And I think that kind of that shows us the boundaries and everything else. I love that.
Yeah. So it always starts for me inside, always starts, but that's just who I am. So it has to be small. It has to be manageable, but always from the inside and always from a place of wanting to be better for the world. What can I do to be better for myself? Because what I do that's better for myself naturally is better for the world.
I love that. Let's do that. Let's be better for ourselves. Let's be better for the world. You guys ready for this? Let's create HAPI. Oh, I did that. All right, guys. Nice. Well, Jensen, I am so grateful that you were willing to come onto this show and talk to us. This has been amazing, honestly.
No, thank you. I'm so appreciative that you asked me. And again, it's just another example of, because I've done the work, I'm able to express this stuff. And had I not done the work, I would have canceled on you. I would have ghosted you. I would have been like, oh, I'm sorry. Was it tonight? Oh, okay. Can we just push it back a couple months? I would have done all the things I used to do. So I'm able to show up for this stuff the greatness that you guys are creating, because I'm taking care of myself. And so thank you for what you're doing to bring awareness and happiness and a place of safety. And I can tell that you all are so passionate about it, and that comes through. So just knowing all you all have to do is be yourselves, and that's it. and you're gonna change people's lives.
You're gonna make me blush here, Jensen. Come on, man. You're pumping my tires too much.
No, it's true. It's true.
Oh,
Thanks so
man.
much, Jensen. This has been awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, guys, for joining us today with Jensen talking about acceptance. It's been an incredible week. We learned a lot. I know I did. I loved hearing from Jensen. I loved hearing his story. I think, for me and for all of us, there were a lot of really good takeaways. Let's go out there, try to be more accepting of ourselves and others. And like I said, let's create some happy.
That was great, man.
Yeah.
Yeah? How'd you like it?
Yeah.
There you go.